everyone, today is part 2 of my Audi special, and I'm in something rather remarkable. This is the very limited edition A1 Quattro. Now the A1 Quattro is a real curio, both when it came out and now. You see, only 333 of these were produced, and only 19 ever officially made their way into the UK, of which this is one. This, of course, is Audi's own personal A1 Quattro. And the A1 Quattro is sort of a bit of an oddity in Audi history. You could simply say that the A1 Quattro is just an outlandish S1 with some silly concept car looks. But in reality, I think it's actually quite an important car, because without this, I don't think the S1 would have ever existed. Now, I've reviewed a standard S1 in the past, and if you want to see my review of that car, click the link up here. But it's an awful lot of fun, the little S1. Perhaps not my favourite Audi to drive, but it's certainly got a lot of appeal. It's always fun to take something the size of a medium shoe and stick a thumping great big turbo engine in it. Now, the story does vary depending on who you ask, but most people, it seems, believe that this platform wasn't really designed from the get-go to have all-wheel drive. Or if it was something that VW Group kind of abandoned halfway through because they realised that to put that in these cars would simply be too expensive. Now, at some point, somebody decided that they wanted to make an S1. However, it was pointed out that no Audi to bear the S prefix before had been two-wheel drive, and they certainly didn't want to break with tradition. But I've no doubt that the financial guys at Audi would have pointed out that to make the small little A1 an all-wheel drive performance car would have been quite expensive. And you can understand their reluctance and concern that this might nibble away from the sales of bigger, more powerful cars like the A3. Or simply that people just wouldn't think it was worth buying at the price that they would need to charge in order to make it cost effective. And so I suspect that's where this came into it. I like to think that this was maybe somebody's late night sketch, just a kind of bit of wishful thinking on the part of a designer as to what a modern day Quattro might look like. And this is unashamedly retro in its styling, and it's a very bold car too. It's awesome to look at with those crazy turbine style wheels, the big wing and the bold white paintwork with this black cockpit. It's a real mean little looking thing. But whatever the story, the decision was made to turn this into a real car. Now, it took no small amount of engineering to do this, because the rear of this car actually has more in relation to the TTRS than it does the regular A1. Such was the extent that Audi's engineers went to in order to make the all-wheel drive system fit. Now, they even had to go to such lengths as reshaping the fuel tank because it was basically in the way of where you wanted the axle to go. So it's no sort of quick special, this car. It really was a solid engineering job. And driving it, you can really feel that. This does genuinely feel like a production car. It's a very well screwed together thing. In fact, having driven the regular S1, when you're actually inside this, it does really feel quite similar to that car. Now, the major differences are the fact that I am sat on the other side, because all A1 Quattros are left-hand drive. It's also got a different gear knob, which is heavily inspired by that used in the R8, a nice steering wheel, and I note a lack of drive modes. The engine in this may also be slightly different. Although it is in theory the same base unit that goes into the S1, this one is officially rated at a little bit more power. So it's about 256 horsepower versus the kind of 230 that you get in the S1. Curiously though, torque on this is slightly down versus the production car. What this also doesn't have, or certainly as far as I can tell, is the adaptive dampers that I wrongly said the S1 doesn't have, but it turns out that it does. Now, this certainly rides firm, and it's not the sort of car that will be naturally suited to a big, long, continent cruising journey. But for a little back road blast, it is an awful lot of fun. Now, the steering doesn't give you masses of feedback, and you are thrown about quite a bit, but the engine is the real star of the show. And you get a real induction from this when you're pushing on, and it responds very well. Now, the best bit, of course, about this being basically an S3 engine is the fact that whatever you could do to an S3 can be done to this. So if you wanted to, turning the wick up to over 300 horsepower is very easy to do, and if I had one of these, I certainly would. I got to be slightly wary because this being a press car, it is still wearing its original 8-year-old tyres, and this car has only covered about 7,500 miles, so I am extremely grateful to the Audi Heritage team for lending it to me. However, this car is practically 1,000,000 miles in comparison to what I'm about to drive next, and that is something indeed very special from Audi's back catalogue. The last video that I shot in this series featured the V12 diesel Q7, and that, although it is an engineering masterpiece, pretty much blends in modern traffic. This thing has no chance. It's got some quite nice subtle accents about it too, if you can call something that looks like it's subtle. My favourite is the little strip of red that's in the headlight. It's really quite a nice little thing. Now, I had a few issues with the S1, my main criticism of which was the fact that the infotainment was hilariously out of date and the interior was just, well, a bit cheap feeling, full of scratchy black plastics and the sort of thing that I just didn't really think felt at home in a £30,000 Audi. Well, unfortunately, the same materials make an appearance here. The sat-nav I kind of give a free pass because this car is, of course, about 7 years older than the S1 that I drove, but cheap materials and things in here, now that wasn't acceptable in an S1 at 30 grand, and it's definitely not cool in a car that cost 40 grand. Yep, these were £41,000, and if you can find one for sale on the second-hand market, I don't expect them to be that much cheaper now. Now, what you do get with this versus the S1 is essentially everything chucked in. There weren't really any options to choose from. What you see is what you get, and they're fully featured with a decent Bose sound system and some really nice leather bucket seats, which the S1 really could do with. And they strike a nice blend between comfort and support. Threading this thing down a road like this is really good fun. Now, the little engine is quite playful, although I've had my senses recalibrated by the Q7 V12 because that thing is just a bit stupid. This, though, certainly moves well, and you've got a much better sense of connection to the road with it. Now, I don't doubt that those ancient tyres are probably robbing this car of a little bit of feel, but it still responds really wonderfully. The turning is great, and it's just a hoot. Pulls strong all the way to the red line, and you just get this because it draws in the air. Really, I think this car existed as a bit of a proof of concept for Audi. Can we really sell an A1 at 30 grand? Yes, they could, because these at 40 flew off the shelves. All 19 were snapped up the moment they were announced, and I tried to find one of these currently for sale, and there were precisely 0. So I think the people that have got them aren't in any hurry to get rid of them. And I can kind of understand why. It's an odd thing. Looks like a concept car, but actually drives like a really well-finished production car, because in truth, I think that's what this was. This was essentially an S1 prototype, and it is cool. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you've enjoyed watching this little slice of cool retro-inspired Audi goodness. Big thanks again to Alex at Audi for sorting this out for me. Thanks to Darren for coming down and helping shoot. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots more cool content coming this week and this month as part of the channel's 3rd anniversary. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.